Welcome to the Glass Alibi.
Welcome back to the Glass Alibi.
Hey, great to be here again.
Yeah, it's great to have you with us as we dive into just a massive stack of sources today. We're pulling together a lot of historical records, forensic reports, legal inquiries, basically everything we could find to piece together one of the most chilling true crime cases in modern British history.
Right, it's a heavy one.
It really is. We are unpacking the 2002 Soham murders. This is the case of those two 10-year-old best friends, Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, and the man who took them, Ian Huntley. The mission for today's deep dive is to take all this source material and give you the full picture. You know how a predator hid in plain sight, and the massive shockwaves this case sent through an entire nation's legal system.
And setting the tone early on here is vital. Dealing with a case of this magnitude, it requires a profound level of respect. Our goal today isn't merely to recount a horrific tragedy. We're really looking to understand the mechanics behind it. We need to examine the systemic failures that allowed this to happen in the first place, and perhaps most importantly, analyze the sweeping reforms to child safeguarding that followed.
Yeah, to understand the gravity of those reforms, we have to start at the beginning. So the date of the incident is August 4th, 2002, or 8/40/2002. We're in this small, really tight-knit Cambridgeshire town of Soham.
A place where everyone knows everyone.
Right. And when you look at the background on the victims, Holly Marie Wells and Jessica Chapman, the word that comes up in literally every single article is inseparable. They were 10 years old, best friends, just deeply embedded in the fabric of their community.
You really get a sense of their bond through the small details in the sources.
You do. For instance, Jessica was wearing an H necklace that afternoon. She had bought it specifically for Holly during a recent family holiday to Menorca, just as a symbol of their friendship.
It's those precise, personal details that make the reality of this case so difficult to process. They were just children, enjoying a long summer weekend in a town where they felt entirely safe.
Yeah, that communal safety is crucial to understanding the events of that afternoon. There was a family barbecue at Holly's house, and at 5:04 p.m., Holly's mother took a photograph of the girls.
The famous photo.
Yeah. If you have ever looked into this case or even just followed the news back in 2002, you know this photo. The girls are standing side by side, smiling brightly, wearing those matching red David Beckham #7 Manchester United football shirts.
It's just a snapshot of absolute innocence.
It is. But it would rapidly become one of the most widely circulated and haunting photographs in British history.
What's fascinating here is how the timeline from the moment that photograph was taken accelerates into a staggeringly narrow window.
It's terrifying.
Think about how fast 20 minutes goes by in your own day. You might spend 20 minutes just scrolling on your phone or driving to the store. In this case, a 20-minute gap literally changed British history forever.
Let's break down that clock for everyone.
Right. So at 6:05 p.m., the girls leave the family barbecue to go buy some sweets at a local sports center.
Just a normal errand. Yeah.
Exactly. Then, by 6:28 p.m., CCTV cameras capture them arriving at that sports center. But then, at 6:46 p.m., Jessica's mobile phone is switched off. The signal completely dies.
Wow.
They're officially reported missing later that night at 9:55 p.m., but the tragic reality is that their fate was sealed in that tiny 20-minute gap between 6:28 and 6:46.
20 minutes. It's hard to even think about. And the response from the authorities when those girls were reported missing at 9:55 p.m., it was unprecedented. We're looking at the largest search operation in British criminal history.
The logistics are staggering.
They really are. The records show they had over 400 full-time police officers dedicated solely to this case. They conducted 260 separate interviews with registered sex offenders across the entire UK.
And the scale extended beyond domestic law enforcement, too. The area around Soham is near several military installations, and the operation actually brought in U.S. Air Force personnel from nearby bases to help scour the rural landscape.
The whole nation was essentially on pause, completely fixated on finding those two girls in the matching red shirts.
And right in the middle of this massive, highly coordinated search, the primary suspect was hiding in plain sight.
I have the profile on Ian Huntley right here. He was the senior caretaker at the local secondary school, Soham Village College. What is truly mind-boggling about his role in this crime is his absolute audacity in the days following the disappearance.
He didn't lay low at all.
Not even a little bit. He actively inserted himself into the center of the investigation. The news archives show him giving multiple television interviews, essentially acting as an unofficial community spokesman.
Yeah, he's on camera expressing his profound shock, holding out what he called a glimmer of hope.
Right, and he even voluntarily approached the police to tell them he was the last person to see the girls alive. He claimed they stopped by his doorstep that evening to ask how his girlfriend's recent job application went.
The psychological manipulation at play there is staggering. He's standing in front of cameras, giving these very calm, measured interviews while knowing exactly what he had done.
And he didn't just stop at television interviews either.
No, while playing the concerned citizen, he was actively pulling police officers aside and asking them probing, highly technical questions about the investigation. Specifically, he was asking them about the lifespan of DNA.
That's just wow.
He wanted to know how long genetic evidence could survive outdoors.
That detail alone should have set off every alarm bell in the precinct.
Yeah.
A school caretaker asking detectives about DNA degradation while 2 girls are missing. Come on! And the notes also mentioned physical red flags from...
They did. Officers noticed 3 distinct vertical scratches down his face during these interactions.
How did he explain those?
When pressed about the fresh scratches, Huntley simply brushed it off, blaming his dog. It was a flimsy excuse, but in the chaos of a 400-officer search operation, those individual anomalies weren't immediately pieced together.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because to fully grasp Huntley's deception, we have to look at his accomplice, Maxine Carr. She was his girlfriend, but crucially, she was also the girl's trusted teaching assistant at St. Andrew's Primary School.
That's a huge factor.
Imagine you're a parent, or even just a 10-year-old kid. You trust your teachers. The girls knew her, they liked her, they felt completely safe around her.
And that dynamic is exactly why this particular element of the case hit the British public so incredibly hard. It was a profound betrayal of communal trust. Parents send their children to school believing the staff are vetted and safe.
Absolutely.
For a teaching assistant to be involved in a cover-up involving her own students, it elevates the crime to a completely different level of psychological trauma for the community.
And the extent of her lies is documented heavily in these sources. Carr goes on television alongside Huntley. She corroborates his entire fake doorstep story. She tells the media and the police that she was in the bath when the girls stopped by.
It was so calculated.
She even shows reporters a sweet little thank you card that Holly had given her at the end of the school year. She's looking right into the camera lens and pleading for the girls to come home. But reading the timeline, it was a complete fabrication.
None of it was true.
Right. She wasn't in the bath. She wasn't even in the town of Soham. She was actually 100 miles away in Grimsby visiting her mother. She provided a completely false alibi to protect Ian Huntley.
The official records do note a psychological nuance to her involvement that's worth mentioning there. When the forensic evidence eventually became insurmountable and the police confronted Carr with the grim reality of what Huntley had actually done, she appeared to suffer a genuine breakdown.
Really?
Yeah, the transcripts note her screaming, "He hasn't done it, it can't have been." She had lied to protect him from suspicion, seemingly convinced by his manipulative charm that he was innocent of anything sinister.
But regardless of what she actually believed internally, her lie created a massive, devastating roadblock in those crucial early days of the investigation.
A roadblock that brings us to the most infuriating part of these sources, the systemic blind spots.
Yeah. How on earth did a man like Ian Huntley secure a job working as a caretaker near children in the first place? Looking into his background, it is just a parade of ignored red flags.
It's shocking.
Between 1995 and 1998, he had a deeply troubling history involving sexual relationships with at least 4 underage girls. There was also a horrifying incident documented in 1997 involving an 11-year-old girl.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the institutional failure here is catastrophic. It wasn't just one bureaucratic mistake. Huntley had rape allegations filed against him in 1998 and 1999. He had a burglary charge on his record.
It's an undeniable pattern.
In total, he came to the attention of the police on 10 separate occasions, and he was known to social services from 5 different incidents.
10 separate police interactions and 5 social services reports. It's really hard to comprehend how a person with that specific trail of predatory behavior passes any kind of background check to work at a school.
It happened because he fell perfectly into the gaps between uncommunicative bureaucracies. In the early 2000s, these systems operated in complete data silos. Social services, Humberside Police, and other regional branches viewed every single incident in complete isolation. Because no single charge had resulted in a major high-profile conviction, nobody zoomed out to detect the glaring, escalating pattern.
And he changed his name, didn't he?
Yes. When he applied for the caretaker job in Soham, he used his mother's maiden name, applying as Ian Nixon. He underwent a cursory background check, but the intelligence records at Humberside Police were so poorly maintained that even if he had used his real name, he likely would have slipped through. The infrastructure to connect the dots simply did not exist.
Leaving a predator right in the path of two 10-year-old girls. So the search went on for 13 agonizing days. Then, the worst fears of the community and the nation were realized.
Yeah.
A gamekeeper working near RAF Lakenheath, which is a Royal Air Force station hosting U.S. Air Force units about 10 miles away from Soham, noticed a smell. He discovered the girls' bodies in a remote, 5-foot-deep irrigation ditch.
Just a horrific outcome.
The forensic reports state that Huntley had burned the bodies in a desperate attempt to destroy evidence, but they were eventually confirmed via DNA testing. The medical examiners determined the girls had died of asphyxiation.
It was a gruesome, heartbreaking discovery that shifted the entire operation from a rescue mission to a homicide investigation. However, even before the gamekeeper found the bodies in that ditch, the net was already closing in on Huntley.
Because the tips were pouring in, right?
Exactly. Primarily from people back in Grimsby, his hometown. They saw him playing the hero on the national news broadcast and immediately started calling the police tip lines. They recognized him. They knew his dark history with underage girls.
And they knew about Maxine Carr's location.
Yes. People in Grimsby knew that Maxine Carr had actually been out socializing in their town on August 4th, which completely blew up her in-the-bath alibi. That influx of intelligence led the police to raid Huntley's home and workplace.
The arrest reports detail some truly bizarre behavior from Huntley once he was in custody. He flatly refused to answer any questions. Instead, he attempted to feign severe mental illness.
He tried to play the system.
He was literally drooling, acting catatonic, and pretending to be entirely disconnected from reality. This performance led to him being transferred to Rampton Secure Hospital, which is a high-security psychiatric facility in the UK, for a full assessment.
But forensic psychiatrists deal with malingering constantly. They quickly saw right through his act and proved he was faking. He knew exactly what he was doing.
And at the same time, Maxine Carr finally broke down and confessed to the false alibi, removing his only shield.
Right. And while Huntley is at Rampton trying to fake his way out of an interrogation, the forensic teams are tearing his house and his car apart. Looking at the evidence logs, the forensic work in this case is incredible.
Let's talk about the house first.
Huntley had scrubbed his entire house from top to bottom with what investigators specifically logged as lemony fluid to try and wash away the crime scene.
But you can never clean everything.
It's not with modern forensics. Despite his extensive scrubbing with the lemony bleach, crime scene investigators found blood spatter in the hallway of his home. But the most damning evidence came from his workplace.
The bins.
Inside a bin, in a school hangar, hidden beneath a layer of rubbish, investigators found the charred remains of those iconic red Manchester United football shirts.
Wow.
Not only were Huntley's fingerprints all over the bin, but forensic analysts matched fibers from those specific shirts perfectly to fibers found on Huntley's clothing and inside his house.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. They didn't just stop at the house and the school. They looked at his car, a Ford Fiesta. Huntley had ripped out the rear seat cover and completely replaced the boot lining to hide any transfer evidence from moving the bodies.
He thought of almost everything.
Almost. But the investigators looked underneath the car, inside the wheel arches. And in those wheel arches, they found a highly specific mixture of brick dust, chalk, and concrete. That exact mineral compound perfectly matched the remote road surface leading right to the irrigation ditch near RAF Lakenheath where the bodies were dumped.
That is the exact kind of granular detail that completely undoes a calculated deception. He thought he had outsmarted the entire police force by replacing his car's upholstery and bleaching his floors, but he forgot about the dust trapped inside his tires.
Which brings us to the trial at London's Old Bailey in late 2003. The prosecution laid out a brutal, methodical case. They argued this was a ruthless, sexually motivated crime, citing his long history of predatory behavior and laying out that undeniable forensic trail.
And the trial transcripts show Huntley's desperation peaking. 3 weeks into the proceedings, faced with insurmountable physical evidence, he radically changes his story on the witness stand.
Yeah, the pivot is insane.
He realizes the doorstep lie isn't viable anymore, so he invents this absurd accidental death defense.
The details of this defense are beyond insulting to anyone's intelligence. According to his fabricated story, he claimed he invited the girls in simply because Holly had a nosebleed. He then claimed he accidentally knocked Holly into a water-filled bath while trying to help her, causing her to drown while he panicked.
It's just ridiculous.
Then he claimed he accidentally suffocated Jessica while merely trying to stop her from screaming about her friend. 2 accidental deaths, back to back, followed by burning the bodies in a massive national cover-up.
It was a transparently desperate lie, and the jury saw right through it. After 4 days of deliberation, they returned an 11-to-1 majority guilty verdict on 2 counts of murder.
Finally.
Ian Huntley was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term set at 40 years. Maxine Carr was found guilty of perverting the course of justice for her fabricated alibi, and she received a 3.5-year sentence.
So what does this all mean in the long run? Obviously, justice was served for Huntley, but the aftermath of Maxine Carr's sentence created a fascinating and incredibly rare legal precedent.
The anonymity order.
Right. The public hostility toward her was so intense that women who simply looked like her were being physically attacked in the streets. Because of this extreme threat level, the High Court granted Carr lifetime anonymity and a completely new identity upon her release. It's a massive legal rarity in the UK. She is one of only 4 former prisoners ever granted that level of state protection, similar to the precedent set by the killers of the toddler James Bulger back in the 1990s.
The necessity of that anonymity highlights the sheer emotional velocity this case carried. But the most vital legacy of the Soham murders wasn't just inside the courtroom, it was structural.
The systemic reforms.
Exactly. The public outcry triggered the Bichard Inquiry, led by Sir Michael Bichard. This was a comprehensive 196-page government report that laid bare the systematic and corporate failures of the police intelligence networks.
It put everything out in the open.
It exposed exactly how the data silos at Humberside Social Services operated, and how a man with a documented history of preying on children was simply handed the keys to a secondary school.
If you're listening to this, and you live in the UK or really any country that modeled its safeguarding systems on these British reforms, this connects directly to you. If you've ever had to get a background check to volunteer at a school, coach a youth sports team, or work with vulnerable adults, this case is the reason why the process is so thorough today.
Precisely. The findings of the 196-page Bichard Inquiry gave birth to the Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups Act of 2006. It fundamentally led to the creation of the modern DBS check, the disclosure and barring service.
A total game changer.
Before the Soham case, background checks were often discretionary, localized, and full of blind spots. After Soham, comprehensive cross-agency vetting became a strict, standardized legal requirement. It forced police departments and social services to share data, effectively closing the loopholes that let a predator like Huntley slip through.
While the legal system was overhauling how we protect children on the outside, inside the prison system, a different kind of reckoning was waiting for Huntley. Life behind bars for Britain's most reviled inmate has been a documentation of constant violence. From the moment he stepped inside, he became a primary target for other inmates.
The harsh, documented reality of the prison hierarchy places child killers at the absolute bottom.
And the timeline of violence against him is extensive. In September 2005, he was scalded with boiling water by another murderer. In 2010, an armed robber slashed him across the throat, leaving a 7-inch wound.
He's had a target on his back for decades.
But the most shocking update in our research comes right up to the present day. Just recently, on February 26, 2026, Huntley was brutally attacked in the prison's recycling workshop. The chief suspect is a triple killer named Anthony Russell, who reportedly bludgeoned Huntley over the head with a 3-foot metal pole fitted with a spike.
The medical reality following this latest attack is grim. Huntley suffered severe brain trauma, he's been left blind, and was given just a 5% chance to survive the injuries. Recent reports indicated that his life support was being switched off, with medical sources stating he was hours from death. The cycle of violence inside that system ultimately caught up with him in the most extreme way possible.
It's a dark, brutal end to a dark story. But the legacy of the case, the 196-page inquiry, the DBS checks, the modern vigilance, remains the most important takeaway. We've covered the tragedy, the investigation, the forensics, and the aftermath. But as we wrap up this deep dive, there's a lingering theme beneath all these case files that merits a final thought.
This raises an important question for you to mull over as we close. During the initial inquiry, Humberside police attempted to blame the Data Protection Act for why they hadn't kept Huntley's records on file. They claimed privacy laws forced them to delete the old allegations. Now, the inquiry proved that was merely an excuse for poor record keeping, but it sparks a fascinating ongoing debate. When does the right to privacy become a shield for predators? How do we, as a society, balance a person's right to a clean slate, especially if they were never formally convicted of a crime, with our absolute need to protect the most vulnerable among us? It is a tightrope we are still walking today.
Thank you for listening to the Glass Alibi podcast. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. New episodes every week.